Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to Paths to Publications. We're so excited to have you with us today. For those who are new, Paths to Publication is a virtual event hosted by the Center for Research for Dual Language and Literacy Acquisition, the ELRC Education Outreach, and the Graduate Student Advisory Council. This is where we dive into everything that graduate students need to know about writing, publishing, research grants, and navigating the ups and downs of the grad experience. Throughout today's session, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can during the discussion towards the end of it. And now I am thrilled to introduce our speaker, Dr. Amin Davoodi. So Dr. Davoodi is an assistant professor of bilingual ESL education at the University of Texas, Permian Basin. He earned his PhD in bilingual ESL teacher education and technology and curriculum instruction from Texas A&M University in 2021. With 2 decades of teaching experience across the globe, Dr. Davoodi has delivered keynote speeches and led teacher training courses in the US, Canada, Mexico, Belize, Armenia, Iran, Turkey, Thailand, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Egypt. His research focuses on tech-driven equity. Yes, with so much of experience, Dr. Davoodi, we can't wait to hear more from you. There's more. So today, basically, Dr. Davoodi will be guiding us through beyond the hype, knowing when to engage and when to refrain from AI in education. That is a topic that couldn't be more relevant right now. AI is everywhere, but how do we use it responsibly and when should we step back? Well, luckily, we have the perfect expert to guide us through these questions. So without further ado, over to you, Dr. Davoodi.
Thank you so much, Maureen, for this nice introduction. I would like to thank Christina as well as Dr. Irby for this kind invitation. It's an honor for me to be here. So let me go ahead and share my screen since I'm going to be using a couple of different documents. I'm going to share a window which has a couple of PDF documents. Okay, so I assume you see the slides, yeah? Okay.
Yes, Dr. Davoodi.
Cool. Yeah. So basically, today we're going to talk about AI, but mostly whether we need to use it or it's just a hype or do we have to jump on it? So basically, a fundamental question about the use of AI. So part of this presentation focuses on AI for teaching and for educators, but the rest I will focus on a couple of different frameworks that I have personally developed and published recently to help researchers to realize whether they need to use AI or not, and if the answer is yes, how can they use it? So, which I think aligns kind of well with the theme of this past publication series. But let's just quickly look at the hype around AI in education, which seems to be really interesting because we have a lot of over promises and things that people claim that AI can do for educators, which might not necessarily be true. So that's why I have over promises versus actual impact. For example, a lot of teachers talk about the future of education, teachers, professors being replaced by AI, which to me that's not necessarily the case. And we may argue that yes, we will have teachers and professors, educators, researchers who will be able to use AI, and that those may replace the traditional ones, but it's just too much to say that all the teachers and all the researchers will be replaced by AI. So that's kind of like an overpromise because it's at least at this stage we know all the limitations that AI platforms have. Although we acknowledge the amazing things they can do for us, they're still very limited. Also, the second point, AI in education is often seen as a solution to all problems. This is a huge issue, especially because I deal with pre-service and in-service teachers, not just in the US, all around the world where I go and train teachers. For example, I had 2 recent trips to the country of Belize, in which I trained their higher education faculty how to benefit from AI and basically how not to use it when it's not appropriate and it's not suitable. So this is the biggest challenge that I have, that a lot of educators these days, they believe that AI is the answer to all the problems that they have. But unfortunately, they forget that the majority of these problems are pedagogical problems. To me, pedagogy comes first all the time. You can never solve a pedagogical problem with just the technology because of the fact that you're using a high advanced technology. You're going to solve a pedagogical issue. A pedagogical issue can be only solved and resolved with a pedagogical approach. But within that pedagogical approach, we can definitely benefit from technology. But the fact that a lot of people argue that technology itself can solve these educational and pedagogical issues, to me, that is absolutely wrong. So we will talk about that more later. I'm also aware that this is a 30-minute presentation, so I may not be able to go uh, through the details, but hopefully we will be able to cover the foundations and the basics of this argument. Uh, I wanted to show you a very interesting model, which is from ironically 1995. When we talk about like technology, every single day new platforms, kind of emerge. But it's very interesting that it's still this hype cycle by Gartner, in my opinion, is the best one that can describe the current situation that we have with AI. So if you look at this cycle or this graph, you can see that whenever a new technology is introduced, usually a lot of people try to jump and start using it, and everybody is excited. So that's what is referred to as peak of inflated expectation. I was thinking a lot whether I should say we are in this stage or now we are in that trough of disillusionment, which is kind of like a sharp decrease in the number of people who will use a certain, technology. I think we are somehow somewhere in between. And the reason is that with this fast evolving nature of AI and other emerging technologies, every single day a new platform comes, which might be totally different with the previous one. So that's why it can create a lot of passion for a lot of people to kind of jump and use it. So we go back and forth between the inflated expectation and the trough of disillusionment, in my opinion. But eventually, it's hard to predict, but I think within a couple of years, we will kind of go through that slope of enlightenment and reach that plateau of productivity. As you can see, the plateau of productivity is not as high as the inflated expectation peak that we have, but it's not like the drop of disillusionment either. So if you ask me how many people, like what percentage of educators, teachers, researchers are going to use AI, the answer would be based on experience, based on research, based on the successful model. The answer would be a lot of people, but not as many as the ones who are using it now, if that makes sense, because I believe we are still in that peak of inflated expectation phase. This is a very important argument because a lot of political decisions, a lot of educational decisions, a lot of policies are being made based on like kind of the nature of relationship that teachers and educators have with AI right now, which might not necessarily portray the real need and the real benefits of using it just because of how uh, dynamic the situation is. So I hope that within a couple of years we will reach that plateau of productivity so we can have more in-depth discussions about how we're gonna deal with AI, especially when it comes to higher education, because I do believe that it's gonna definitely change and transform higher education. And hopefully that will happen in K through 12 as well. But again, experience shows that usually when it comes to K through 12, we're kind of the slower and we are behind. So if let's say we will reach that plateau of productivity within a couple of years in higher education, that might take 5 or 6 years in K through 12. I might be wrong. These are just based on the previous, technological revolutions that kind of happened over the past few decades. But in terms of the significance of this hype cycle, I can refer you to some of the journals within your discipline. So if you go and look at new articles being published in these journals, I think the number of papers dealing with AI kind of skyrocketed in the past couple of years. I do not believe that within a couple of years it's going to be the same, but still we will have a lot of people working on AI. I do not want to compare it to the COVID-19 situation, but in a way, the hype is similar. I've seen a lot of researchers who published like tens of articles about the effect of COVID-19 on education, which was great at that time, but obviously that wouldn't be the focus in the future. AI is a little bit different because I'm sure we will be using it for years. But again, I do not believe that we will see as many research articles as we see today in a few years. It's just because of the excitement that a lot of people have. Very quickly, if I want to talk about some of the issues that we have with this hype, I can talk about the fact that a lot of people use AI, even in research projects without clear goals. I can give you an example. So I went to a very, I was about to mention the name of the conference, which I prefer not to do that. I went to a very good conference, let's put it that way. Really well known, full of brilliant presentations. So somebody who I'm sure was a great researcher in the field of biology was presenting an AI related study, but because it was about education and teaching biology, so I attended that session. That sounded really interesting to me. But unfortunately, when I was in that session, I realized that the co-authors of that paper, the presenters, basically tried to use AI just for the sake of using AI, if that makes sense. Meaning that just because of the hype, because I specifically asked them, I said, what you described, the way you used AI, basically you could have done it traditionally without any obvious changes. So I'm not going to go through the details. So the answer was yes, but we wanted to try it and we wanted to use it. To me, that's a little bit problematic when you do not have clear goals. It goes back to the same argument that I had in the beginning of the presentation that pedagogy should precede technology. Technology cannot solve pedagogical issues. It can help you to come up with a better pedagogical approach, but technology itself cannot solve all the pedagogical issues. Based on my experience, teacher training, not just in the US, in other countries, this is what I believe in. Technology can make a good teacher a better one and can make a bad teacher a worse one. And the reason is that because technology, in my opinion, only magnifies who you are as an educator. So if you're already a good educator, you have good pedagogical, approaches, you have clear goals, definitely technology or any other tool can help you to become a more effective one. But if the pedagogy is problematic, you have a lot of issues, you don't know what you're doing as an educator, technology can make it even worse and make it more complicated. Another thing is that a lot of people claim that AI basically improves learning to a very large extent. At least as of now, we haven't seen a lot of studies proving that. Yes, it is great. It can help teachers, researchers, students, but it's not like some of these exaggerations that I hear regarding the effectiveness of it. And also, again, as I mentioned, pedagogical frameworks must come first. So this is basically what I just covered. The pedagogy, in my opinion, should pursue technology because it does not fix poor pedagogy, technology itself, and AI should support educational goals, not replace them. And that's another thing that I observe when I go and work with teachers and service teachers, both in higher ed and K through 12, that when I ask them about their pedagogical goals, about the learning outcomes, all they're talking about is the technology. So to me, it should be the opposite. Technology helps you to achieve that goal. If the goal is the technology itself, that's not very good. That's the nicest way I can I can phrase it. Okay, let's just move on since we do not have a lot of time. So I'm gonna cover this in the framework that I'm gonna show you. So let's just go to a couple of frameworks that I wanted to introduce today. So this is a recent publication. This is a paper that I recently published in October of 2024. In this paper, sorry, I developed a model to use AI in K through 12 education. Although the emphasis and the focus is on bilingual English language learners, it can be adapted to any other disciplines. I had a grant, I worked with two school districts, and basically you can download the article or I can share it with you. But this is the one I wanted to talk about, the framework that I that I developed in this study. So let me go to the framework, and it's based on connectivism. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with connectivism, which, in my opinion, is a great theoretical framework for anything related to educational technology because it deals basically on various sources of input, which I believe personally is key to success when it comes to technology in education. So this is the model that I created. And basically, as you can see, there are four nodes, again, based on connectivism. So I had the professional development, I had the institutional support team, I developed the personal learning and collaborative learning habits and the platforms for the participants in this study. And you can see that each of these major nodes, they have sections as well. For example, the institutional support is not only resource provision, but also providing the ethical guidelines and AI policy. Or if you look at the collaborative learning, it's not only peer interaction, but also communities of practice. And the personal learning is both experience-based learning and self-directed learning. And I explain all of these in details in this paper, which was a very successful project working with mostly elementary school teachers in West Texas. And for example, if you look at the professional development, not only did we have AI workshops, but also a lot of asynchronous tutorials in form of like videos, as well as a lot of reflection sessions. But what is the main goal behind this model? The main goal is to argue that if you want to improve your knowledge when it comes to technology, whether it's AI or anything else, you cannot rely on one source. Again, dealing with connectivism, you have to be able to provide input and find input from multiple different sources. Otherwise, a kind of a linear learning wouldn't necessarily help you to succeed when it comes to implementing technology in education. That's why I named the article Crafting Innovative Path in Nonlinear Professional Learning for Educators. So basically, this was something I wanted to show you. I know this is path to publication, this is for research purposes. So I wanted to introduce this model, also, make you aware of connectivism. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, but it's a good idea to look at it, especially if you are interested in doing anything about technology and education research. So the other framework that I wanted to show you is another paper which I recently published. So it's a model, I called it Equal AI, which is a framework for enhancing equity, quality, understanding, and accessibility in liberal arts through AI, with again an emphasis for multilingual learners. But when it says liberal arts, I had a broader definition of it, which includes education as well. So here in this model, let me go and find the graph. Okay, here. So again, going back to connectivism, if you want to be successful when it comes to implementing technology, even if it's for research purposes, which will be the next part I will be talking about, again, you have to be able to go through a lot of different steps, get your input from a lot of different sources, and have a a network of basically learning experiences and opportunities. For example, in this model that you can see, which focuses on AI affordances for liberal arts pedagogy, we have the linguistic support and accessibility, but we also have the cultural engagement and representation, then creative expression and multimodal learning, then critical thinking and ethical engagement, and finally collaborative and inclusive learning. And each one has, different stages that you need to go through. So when I hear that a lot of teachers talk about the fact that they want to use technology to make their life easier, that might not necessarily be the case if you don't know how to use the technology. So it is very important to be able to determine what kind of technology you want to use, how you're going to use it. Just jumping, and because of the hype and trying to choose the technology and use it without doing your research, without knowing how to use it, can cause a lot of different issues. Now, the last part of the presentation, I think we have about 10 minutes. I wanted to introduce another model. This is still under review, but I don't mind sharing it with you. So this is a framework that I created specifically for research, because a lot of, again, students that I have, graduate students, a lot of colleagues, when we talk, they want to know whether they need to use AI, whether they should use AI, when it is better for them not to use AI. So I came up with this idea, and I worked. This was a project that took about 2 years. So I came up with three different frameworks. One is for teachers, when to use AI, when not to use AI. One for students, basically meaning learners, and the third one is for research. And again, since this is past the publication workshop series, so I decided to just focus on the research one. And I've done a lot of different models. I did a lot of pilot studies, getting feedback from researchers. And I realized that although we are dealing with a very complicated issue, the framework itself needs to be very easy and simple, especially in terms of language. So I decided to just make it a yes, no, basically framework model, which asks several different questions. And in order to come up with these questions, I've done a lot of, as I said, pilot studies and research, getting input from multiple sources, including interviews with other researchers. But to me, maybe it's a claim, I think it's a very easy to use framework, which can help especially novice researchers to realize whether they really need to use AI or basically any other technology, or it's just they want to use it for the sake of using it, which is very dangerous, as I mentioned. So let's just focus on this framework for a few minutes. So I'm gonna zoom in. So the first question is basically we want to identify the research phase for AI application. And again, you can replace this AI with any emerging technology, but let's just focus on AI for now. So what does this mean? Imagine that you're doing a research project, whether it's your dissertation, your thesis, or just a paper, collaborative with your professors, and you have this idea of using this AI tool, whatever the AI tool is, whether it's for generating pictures, whether it's like a large language model. The key is, I think the key is to identify in which phase of your research project you want to use it. If you know, so the answer is yes, then we can move on. If the answer is no, basically my recommendation is do not use AI because you are not ready for it. So, but how can you determine? How can you determine which phase of your research project would be good to use AI? Well, it depends on a couple of different factors. The first one is, what is the reason that you even started to think about using AI? Is it because you wanted to do something and you were not able to do it, let's say, traditionally, whether it was like generating pictures, doing some sort of analysis that you think AI might be able to do it better? So I always believe that when you want to use technology, in this case AI, that the first moment that you start thinking about using it, it should come because it should happen because of an issue or a problem that you weren't able to solve without that technology. So if that is the case, for example, let me give you an example. You're doing a systematic literature review for any reason, although you have good inclusion exclusion criteria, you're dealing with hundreds of papers and you believe that you might not be able to do a high quality job when it comes to screening. So you may think that, okay, if I find a platform, technology or an AI that can help me, that would make sense. To me, that's a legitimate yes answer. So you know for which phase or which stage of your research project you want to use it. So basically, that is the fundamental question based on the model that I created. So if the answer is no, obviously you need to spend more time, so you're not ready to use AI. But if the answer is yes, then we go to the next stage, which is evaluate potential benefits of AI application. Okay, going back to the same example. So you want to do 300, 400 papers, you want to use an AI to help you to kind of, go through the papers, maybe help you with, your decisions regarding including some of them or excluding them. So you need to figure out if the platform you're going to use, it has that capability and the potential to do what you are supposed to do. So let me give you an example. A lot of people still talk about the fact that the most famous large language model, ChatGPT, for example, they talk about the hallucination when it comes to citations and references. So as soon as they start talking about this, that why it creates fake citations and those citations do not exist. My question is, why did you even use ChatGPT to find citations? Because that's not among the features. That's not like it's not a potential, it's not a feature that ChatGPT is capable of doing. So that is the first question. So why did you even want to use that? Yes, there are other AI platforms. At least we can say they claim that they are good at finding reliable resources, but that's not a claim that ChatGPT, does. So why did you even start using it for that purpose? So that's what I'm talking about. Evaluate the potential benefits of that AI application. You may want to see if other people in other research studies have used that, or at least read the guidelines and make sure what you're using is basically designed and is capable of doing what you're asking it to do for you. Because you cannot ask somebody who is not an expert in something, and when the result is not what you expected, then start blaming that person because it was wrong in the first place. So again, if the answer is no, you're not ready to use AI. If the answer is yes, then the next phase, which is important, is to assess the AI tool credibility and precision. So this is kind of broader. What do I mean by credible? We can say whether it's reliable and valid. And although we will be dealing with ethical issues in other stages, part of it also comes with this credibility and precision as well. So you're gonna use an AI, in what stage you're gonna use it, the potential benefits, the features, that it is capable of doing that. Now you want to assess it, whether it's credible or not, whether it is safe or not, whether it is, basically to the extent that you want to use it is valid and reliable. So that's again, you need to do research. You need to figure out if someone else have done that, or even you can do pilot studies and test it yourself because you may come up with an idea to use a new platform that nobody has ever used. But the thing is that do not jump into conclusions and say that, okay, this is the best platform, I have to use it without going through something like this, like a process in which you can uh, be sure that you're using an AI platform the correct way possible. So we have only a couple of minutes, so let's just move on very quickly. Then we have you have to check the compatibility if the answer was yes to the previous question with your research protocols. And this includes both IRB protocols and any other internal protocols that sometimes researchers develop for themselves. So it is very important for you to check on those. So the answer to all of these questions might be yes, but here you see that, okay, the research protocols do not allow you, for example, to upload the students' writings into an AI platform that you wanted to use to analyze them or something like that. So if the answer is no, again, you're not ready to use that. But if the answer is yes, then you need to assess the ethical use of AI. So this is kind of tricky because people have different interpretations of ethics in AI. This is my personal opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is true. But I believe that as long as you will be able, obviously you need the IRB approval, the research protocol and everything, but basically if you are able to kind of de-identify students' pieces, whether it's papers, writings, and you have their permissions, and you are using a platform which is not gonna save that work in their cloud storage, I think you would be fine. But if you are using mostly free trials of these platforms, because they can keep your data for training purposes, or you haven't received like approval from IRB for that, or for example, you do not have the consent from students, so you should be very careful. This is a very serious matter, and you need to take into account all the ethical aspects of using AI. But again, if the answer is yes, then you need to verify the reliability of AI generated insights. This is after basically using it. All the questions so far were about whether you can use it, whether you should use it, but at this stage, you have used it and now you want to verify the reliability of it. And in the paper, I explained how you can verify it, but again, multiple sources. Uh, if you're dealing with, let's say, a summary of someone else's theory or article, you can always refer to the original piece. Or if it is regarding like some sort of content analysis, you can always have the reliability and the validity of that analysis checked by peers. And there are multiple different ways that you can do that, but definitely you will not be able to only rely what the AI is AI platform is generating for you and the output because you're not sure if it is accurate or not. These days, in most cases, they are because they improved a lot. And again, I know it can be expensive, but if you are thinking about using them, try not to use the free versions because they are not as advanced. And again, all the privacy and ethical issues. So, as I said, you can engage with peers, which was the next stage to check the reliability and the validation of it. And then if the answer is yes, then you're able to use it. What does it mean to use it? Basically, it means to include it in your research because you've already used it in the previous stages of this model. But basically, I created this as a kind of like a step-to-step guide for researchers in order to provide them with a model that can help them to make better decisions when it comes to using AI or not, especially because I deal with my graduate students as well, and I teach a research methodology graduate level course. So a lot of the students are interested in using AI, but they don't know whether they should or how. So this might be able to help answer some of those questions. And I'm going to respect your time and I'm going to end right now. So, Maureen, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. This was so insightful, and the step-by-step model that you presented, I'm sure it is so important for meaningful and responsible use of AI. I'd like to welcome and thank Dr. Beverly Irby and Dr. Linda Rodriguez for joining us. Dr. Irby, would you like to share a few words?
Well, I'm sorry I couldn't make it for the beginning, but thank you, Dr. Davoodi, for sharing this. This is wonderful information. I know that you've been working in this area, and this is very critical. I do have to say that to everyone on the call that Dr. Davoodi worked with us in our Education Leadership Research Center and in the Credella Center as well. And I will say, since I wasn't here at the beginning, I'm going to say that he was so very instrumental in helping us to. We had a TESOL. I'm going to go back to that, Dr. Davoodi. We had a TESOL at one time. Dr. Laura had TESOL certification at one time, but it had sort of fallen by the wayside. So Dr. Davoodi really ratcheted that up, got it back up and running for us, and was really instrumental in doing that. And since then, Dr. Davoodi, we've had some other iterations. We, in fact, have another new iteration that will be coming out in March. So we're really excited to be able to continue the work that you helped us to relaunch and get started. So we appreciate all of the work that you did and are still doing out in Permian Basin at University of Texas. And so we just can't say how proud we are of you. And also for any graduate students who are on this path to publication, Dr. Davoodi was our 3-minute thesis winner for, I forgot what year, about four years ago or so, and at Texas A&M. So we would encourage you to try to engage in that 3-minute thesis as well and be a winner just like him. So thank you for being a winner, for everything, Dr. Davoodi, and all of the wonderful work that you continue to do and share with your students and with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Irby, for your kind words, and you kind of brought back a lot of good memories for me. I really appreciate your kind invitation. It's always an honor to see you, even virtually, and talk to you and see the new graduate students who are now working on a lot of amazing projects you have in your centers. Thank you so much, Dr. Irby.
Thank you. I'm going to be jumping off now to get
Sure.
into another meeting across the way, and I'm going to try to say goodbye now, but now it's open for other people to make comments and ask questions. And thank you, Maureen, for being here to facilitate. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Irby. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here. Yes, the floor is open for questions. So Marina has a question. Marina, how about you come online on video, unmute yourself and ask the question?
I'd be happy to, thank you. With keeping in mind that you mentioned earlier that new AI platforms are being created and introduced every single day, are there any current platforms you use, have used, or recommend as a resource?
That's a very good question. So thank you for asking that. It's not easy to keep up with all the new platforms. So, and this is not just about AI. I've been in the field of, at least I can say I've always been interested in emerging technology, so I can say that. So over the years, this has been the case with any new technology. So AI is not an exception. And my attitude, my personal attitude is always the same. Choose one which is reliable and try to update yourself whenever there's a new version of that specific platform and be an expert in that one. Because at the end of the day, I would say 99% of these platforms do exactly the same thing, but it's almost impossible to be an expert in all of them because they have different approaches. To just give you one example, we're dealing with large language models, OpenAI's ChatGPT or Copilot, or even recently XAI and many other platforms. You would get almost the same result. Some of them are better at reasoning, some of them are better at writing, but you would get almost the same result. So what I recommend is to be good at using one. And there is a reason that I say to be good and expert in using one, because prompt engineering, I'm sure you're all familiar. So it's a huge deal when it comes to using AI platforms. The way you ask an AI platform to do something for you is the key. Two people can ask the same task and get different results. So what I recommend, instead of focusing on learning how to communicate with all these different platforms, choose one and become an expert in that one. Personally, maybe it's because OpenAI's ChatGPT was the first one that kind of got attention. So that's the one that I usually use, and I have the premium version of that. But because of research purposes, I explore other platforms as well. One which might be interesting for graduate students just to explore. Again, if you want to use it, you have to go through all the ethical issues. Okay, I don't want you to cite me and say that Dr. Davoodi recommended us to use that. It's a good platform, but again, if you need to go through all the ethical principles. It is called Jenny AI, JENNY.ai, if I'm not wrong. The interesting part is, at least to me, because part of my research focuses on process writing. This is one of the only platforms that doesn't write for you, it writes with you. So basically, think of it as a Google Doc. You are writing a paragraph, and when you are pausing, it suggests some sentences that you can use in that paragraph. So basically, writing with you. And when it comes to references and citations, again, I personally check all of them. I do not rely on AI, but this does a way better job than ChatGPT does, because it provides the links usually to the papers, so it is more valid and reliable. So that's one that you may want to explore. But again, depending on what other things you want to do, you may rely on other platforms. There is one platform that I use in one of my grant projects. It's specifically for teachers. It is called Noodle Factory AI, which is a very interesting platform just for teachers. So it's not like ChatGPT for it. It's not a large language model in a sense that anybody can use it, but it is specifically designed for teachers. So that's another one that you may want to take a look at. I hope I answered your question.
Can you spell that out?
Noodle, like Noodle Factory.
Okay, Noodle.
Yeah, yeah. Noodle
Thank you.
Factory AI. Yeah.
Thank you.
But that's specifically, as I said, for teachers.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, do we have more questions? Because I certainly have one. Dr. Davoodi, what was the greatest challenge in managing your model, especially in bilingual education?
The biggest challenge, I would say, is the reception. Some people are too welcoming, others are too resistant. So you're dealing with a very heterogeneous group of teachers and students when it comes to their belief and their perceptions on using AI. So it's always hard, whether that group is a class, whether it's a group of teachers at a professional development workshop or institute. So it's always hard to be able to meet the needs of both groups, those who are 100% against it, those who are all for it. So I would say that that has been the biggest challenge, to create a balance and to come up with a strategy that both of these groups, because at the end of the day, especially when you work as a teacher trainer, you don't want to force a teacher to do what you think is good. You just want to provide them with options and opportunities.
Of course, because there is both excitement and skepticism around it,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Right. And since you've been in the shoes of doctoral students, for you, how did you balance that?
You mean when I was a doctoral student? I want
Yes.
to would you rephrase the question? I want to make sure I understood it correctly.
Right.
Right.
So as a doctoral student, how did you create that balance? And that is, of course, before you created this fantastic model.
Uh, just it's just hard as a doctoral student.
Yeah.
Having balance in your professional personal life is hard. But one of the things that you may want to do as graduate students, which I kind of regret that I didn't do as much as probably uh, I should have done it more. Yeah, definitely. Is to talk to recently, new graduates from your program, whether in your university or somewhere else, who got a job that's your dream job. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but usually to get job advice, we go to people, maybe our advisors or people who have been in the field for years, but they are not the best people in this regard. The best person to ask and to get, advice is someone who was hired last year. So you can learn a lot from those graduates who were able to find jobs, whether you like to have a job in academia or the industry. I recommend just go and talk with those people because they were like you a year or 2 years ago, but now they have a job that you would be happy if you can get a job like that. And they can provide you with some advice that you cannot find anywhere else, including the internet. So that has been the case, at least for me, and a lot of other people that I know, because they kind of lived your future life. So I would recommend to get in touch with those.
Yes,
Uh,
makes great sense.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, because you're able to then visualize where you want to be few years from now. That makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Um, mhm.
especially if you are an international student, try to reach out to other international students, like former students who now have the jobs that you want to get. Because when it comes to international students, there are a lot of other stuff that you need to handle. So they would be able to provide you with valuable information that you might not be able to get from other people who are not familiar with the issues that international students have, for example.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. So if you don't have any further questions from the chat box, any comments that anyone would like to give? We have Fubio, Andrea. All right. Sometimes some of the questions come after the presentation. We'd be happy to forward you those, Dr. Davoodi, and I really appreciate this session because it helps with the balancing act when it comes to, the, again, excitement and skepticism of using AI. Thank you for putting down your email address. Please note that down. And if you have any questions, here is our email link for everybody on your screens. Feel free to email Christina or me. As your host for today's session, we're signing out and hope to see you for the next session. Thank you again so much, Dr. Davoodi, for this insightful session. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Have a good day, everybody.
Of course. Bye-bye.